Everyone at the dinner table thought they were celebrating my boyfriend's promotion, but they were actually attending the public execution of his reputation. The crystal glass in my hand wasn't for a toast, it was the starting pistol. I looked at Lucas, seated beside me, as he squeezed my thigh under the table. His expression a mixture of triumph and what he probably thought was loving gratitude. His father, Arthur, raised his own glass, his face ruddy with expensive wine and satisfaction. "To my son, the new vice president of acquisitions. We always knew you had it in you." His mother, Eleanor, dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. "Oh, my brilliant boy. And to Chloe, of course, the perfect partner. You've been such a wonderful support for him." I offered her a small, controlled smile. "I've tried to be," I agreed, my voice perfectly even. "Which is why I wanted to do something special to mark the occasion. I've put together a little tribute to all the hard work Lucas has put in over the past year. In fact, I made a copy for everyone." I gestured to the slim, black portfolios placed neatly at each setting. "Please, open them." Lucas's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He thought they were for him, a surprise gift. He was right about the surprise part. His sister, Emily, was the first to untie the silk ribbon. She opened the cover. The change in her was instantaneous. Her jaw went slack, her eyes widening as she stared at the first page. Arthur, ever impatient, tore his open. His jovial expression vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp fury that tightened his features into a mask. Then came the sound. It wasn't a word, just a strangled, high-pitched shriek from Eleanor as she saw the second page, a photograph I had selected with particular care. She dropped the portfolio, as if it were on fire, her hand flying to her mouth. The celebratory atmosphere shattered. The air became thick with a silence so profound it was its own kind of noise. And Lucas, my Lucas, the man I had loved for 5 years, just sat there, his face ashen, his mouth slightly agape, staring at the open portfolio in front of him, at the undeniable, meticulously documented proof of his year-long affair. This moment, this beautiful, terrible, perfectly engineered implosion was not an act of passion. It was not a sudden, hysterical reaction. It was a blueprint, executed with the same precision I used to design buildings. It was the final, load-bearing column in a structure I had been building for months. But how did we get here? How did a life that was, by all accounts, perfect, end in such a spectacular demolition? Let's start from the beginning, from the days when the foundation was still solid, or so I believed. Our story, Lucas's and mine, was the kind people envied. We met in our mid-20s, two ambitious people with complementary dreams. He was in finance, a world of numbers and risks, and I was an architect, a world of lines and structures. We were a power couple in the making. Our life was a series of curated successes, a stylish apartment with a view of the city, weekends in wine country, dinner parties with intelligent, successful friends. It was a life built on a shared vision of the future. I was his biggest cheerleader, his unofficial consultant, his partner in every sense of the word. When he was struggling with a pitch for a major real estate acquisition, I stayed up with him for 3 nights straight, using my knowledge of zoning laws and structural engineering to help him craft a proposal that was not just financially sound, but visionary. The deal made his career. When he needed to network with developers, I opened my contact list, securing him meetings with influential people I had spent years cultivating relationships with. I never saw it as a sacrifice. I saw it as an investment in us, in the future we were building together. I believed in him, and more importantly, I believed in the integrity of our partnership. The cracks, when they began to appear, were so small I barely noticed them. They were hairline fractures, in a facade I had no reason to doubt. It started with his phone. For years, it had been a communal object, left on the kitchen counter or the nightstand without a thought. Then suddenly, it was always in his pocket, or face down on the table. A text would come in, and he would angle his body away from me to read it. A subtle, almost perceptible shift. When I asked who it was, the answer was always the same: just work. Then came the late nights. "The team is pulling an all-nighter to get this deal closed," he would say, his voice weary over the phone. I would make him a late dinner and keep it warm, only for him to text hours later saying he was too exhausted and was just going to crash at a hotel near the office. I accepted it. His ambition was one of the things I had loved about him. I understood the demands of a high-pressure career. The emotional withdrawal was the most insidious change. The man who once shared every detail of his day, every frustration, and every victory, became distant. Our conversations became transactional, focused on logistics and schedules. When I tried to talk to him about it, to ask if something was wrong, he would sigh, a long, theatrical exhalation of breath. "I'm just stressed, Chloe," he'd say, running a hand through his hair. "This promotion is a killer. You, of all people, should understand pressure." He made me feel guilty for questioning him, for adding to his burden. He was right, I told myself. I did understand pressure. I was being needy, insecure. I was failing to be the supportive partner he needed. So I backed off. I gave him space. I doubled down on my support, managing our home, our social life, our entire world, so that he could focus on his career. I ignored the gnawing feeling in my gut, the quiet voice that whispered something was fundamentally wrong. I chose to believe in the structure we had built, even as the foundation was crumbling beneath my feet. The discovery was not a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It was a quiet, clinical audit on a Tuesday afternoon. Lucas had asked me to help him organize his financial documents for his annual review. "You're so much better at this stuff than I am," he'd said with a charming smile, handing me a stack of bank statements and credit card bills. I was happy to help. I sat at our dining room table, the same table where our life would later detonate, and began sorting through the papers. I was creating spreadsheets, categorizing expenses, being the efficient, supportive partner I had always been. And then I saw it. A recurring payment. $3,000, transferred on the first of every month for the past 12 months. The recipient was listed only as S. Jensen. It wasn't a business. It wasn't a loan payment I recognized. It was just a name. My first thought was that it was a professional service, a consultant perhaps, but the amount was too regular, too large to be an incidental expense he hadn't mentioned. A quiet alarm bell went off in my mind. My process from that point was methodical, logical. I was no longer a loving girlfriend. I was an auditor searching for a discrepancy. I opened our shared online banking portal. I searched for S. Jensen. The payments were there, a neat column of debits stretching back exactly 1 year. I cross-referenced the first payment date with our shared calendar. He was in Chicago for a conference, or so he had told me. My next step was to search the name online. S. Jensen, Chicago. Nothing. I broadened the search to our city. A few hits, but nothing that connected to Lucas. Then I had another thought. I went to the company directory for Lucas's firm, which was accessible online. I searched for employees with the initial S. There were several. I went through them one by one, cross-referencing their names with social media, and then I found her, Sophia Jensen, a junior analyst in his department. Her profile picture was professional, smiling. There was nothing overtly suspicious, but the name matched. It was a link, however tenuous. The money was just the beginning. I moved on to the credit card statements. I was looking for patterns. I found them. A charge for 2 tickets to a concert I had wanted to go to, on a night he told me he was working late. A recurring charge for a high-end flower delivery service, but the flowers had never come to our apartment. Hotel charges, dozens of them, always in boutique hotels in neighborhoods we never frequented. For each date, I checked our calendar. Each time he had a work-related excuse, a late-night meeting, an early morning flight, a client dinner. The evidence was piling up, each piece a small, sharp betrayal. The final irrefutable proof, the piece that turned suspicion into certainty, came from our shared cloud drive. We used it for everything: vacation photos, financial documents, household records. I was looking for a receipt for a warranty when I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. It was mislabeled, titled Q3 Projections. It was a strange name for a folder in our personal drive. My heart was pounding now, a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I clicked on it. It wasn't filled with spreadsheets. It was filled with photos and videos, hundreds of them, Lucas and Sophia. At a beach I'd never been to, his arm slung casually around her shoulder. Lucas and Sophia in a hotel room, clinking champagne glasses, a skyline I didn't recognize behind them. Lucas and Sophia at a Christmas market, bundled in scarves, his face lit with a genuine, unguarded joy I hadn't seen in a year. There were videos of them laughing, cooking together in a kitchen that wasn't ours, talking in low, intimate tones. It was a complete, documented history of their life together, a life he had been living in parallel to ours. I sat there for hours, clicking through the files, my mind a blank slate of shock. The woman in the photos with my boyfriend looked happy. He looked happy. They looked real. The feeling that followed the shock wasn't sadness, not at first. It was a profound sense of dislocation, as if the last year of my life had been a lie. Every memory was now tainted, every conversation suspect. The foundation of my reality had been systematically dismantled, and I hadn't even noticed. The shock slowly gave way to a cold, clear certainty. The discrepancy I had found was not financial. It was existential. In the days after the discovery, I did not confront him. I said nothing. I moved through our shared life like a ghost, an observer in what I now knew was a theatrical production. The grief was a physical presence, a weight in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I would lie awake at night, next to the man who was a stranger to me, and I would replay moments from the past year. I remembered a time he had come home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine. He had claimed he'd been seated next to a woman who had overdone it at a client dinner. I had believed him. I remembered the expensive watch that had appeared on his wrist, a gift he said he had bought for himself to celebrate a small victory at work. I now saw the photo of Sophia fastening that same watch on his wrist, her face glowing with affection. Every lie, every deception, every carefully constructed excuse played on a loop in my mind. Each memory was a new cut. The grief was overwhelming, but it was also clarifying. It burned away the confusion, the self-doubt, the guilt he had so skillfully instilled in me. And in its place, something else began to grow. It was a cold, hard anger. It was the anger of an architect who discovers her partner has been using faulty materials, deliberately undermining the structural integrity of their most important project. I realized a private confrontation would be useless. He would lie. He would gaslight me, twist my words, make it my fault. He would tell me I was crazy, that I was misinterpreting things. He would apologize with words that meant nothing, promising to end it, all while planning his next deception. He would try to manage the situation, to control the narrative, just as he had controlled and managed our life for the past year. A quiet, dignified exit was not enough. He didn't deserve my dignity. He deserved to have his perfect facade torn down in front of the people who had enabled it. His family, who saw him as a golden boy incapable of wrongdoing. His father, who valued success and image above all else. His mother, who believed him to be the perfect, devoted son. They were all complicit in the creation of the myth of Lucas Henderson. They had built the pedestal. I was going to be the one to kick it out from under him. The anger was not a raging fire. It was a focused, controlled energy. It gave me a purpose. My grief had shown me the extent of the damage. My anger would be the tool I used to demolish the lie. The idea for the dinner came to me not in a flash of inspiration, but as a logical conclusion. It was the perfect venue for the truth. The Henderson family dinner table was a stage, a place where the family's mythology was performed and reinforced. Lucas's promotion was the perfect occasion, a celebration of the very success he had used as a cover for his betrayal. My motivation was not simple revenge. It was about justice. It was about exposing the truth in a way that could not be denied, spun, or hidden. It was about holding him accountable, not just to me, but to the family that had taught him he could get away with anything. I became an architect of a different kind. My project was not a building of steel and glass, but the systematic deconstruction of a man's life. I approached it with the same meticulous planning I would a major construction project. The portfolios were my blueprints. I spent weeks compiling the evidence. I printed the bank statements, highlighting the monthly payments to S. Jensen. I printed the credit card bills, circling the charges for hotels, flowers, and gifts. I selected the photographs with care, arranging them in chronological order to tell the story of their year-long relationship. The first photo was of them at the Chicago conference, the beginning of it all. The last was a picture taken just last week, a selfie of them in front of the apartment he was paying for, the address of which I found through a public records search linked to the bank account. I included screenshots of texts I found on our shared tablet, which he had foolishly forgotten to log out of, where they discussed their future together, a future that did not include me. Each portfolio was a narrative of deceit, bound in black silk ribbon. I made 5 copies, one for Lucas, one for his father, one for his mother, one for his sister, and one for me. I acted with a chilling calm. I continued to play my part as the supportive girlfriend. I listened to him talk about his plans for his new role. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye in the morning. I was a consummate actress, my performance fueled by a cold, unwavering resolve. Inside, I was a machine, calculating, planning, preparing for the final presentation. This was not about a broken heart. It was about a breach of contract, a fundamental betrayal of a partnership. And I, the architect of our life, would be the one to oversee its official public demolition. The day of the dinner, I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. My hands trembled slightly as I drank my coffee. For a moment, I questioned my plan. Was it too cruel? Too dramatic? Then I looked at the sealed black portfolios sitting on my desk, and my resolve hardened. This was not about cruelty. It was about truth. The hours leading up to our departure were a surreal exercise in duplicity. Lucas was in high spirits, completely oblivious. He came up behind me as I was getting ready, wrapping his arms around my waist and kissing my neck. "You look beautiful, Chloe," he murmured into my hair. "Tonight is going to be perfect." I looked at our reflection in the mirror. We looked like the perfect couple. He was handsome, charming, successful. I was elegant, composed, supportive. It was a beautiful lie. "I can't wait to celebrate with you," I said, my voice smooth, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. He talked excitedly in the car on the way to his parents' house, mapping out his first 90 days as vice president, discussing a potential vacation to Greece in the spring to celebrate us. I listened, nodded, and asked the right questions, all the while clutching my purse, where my own portfolio lay like a dormant weapon. Every affectionate word he spoke, every casual touch, every shared smile he offered was another layer of confirmation. He felt no guilt. He had no conscience. He was so confident in his deception, so certain of my ignorance, that he could plan a future with me while actively living another life. By the time we pulled into his parents' driveway, my anxiety had evaporated, replaced by a profound, almost serene sense of purpose. I was no longer just Chloe, the girlfriend. I was an agent of consequence. I was there to balance the books. We walked into the Henderson house to a chorus of congratulations. Arthur clapped Lucas on the back, his voice booming. "There he is! The man of the hour!" Eleanor rushed forward to hug him, then me. "Chloe, dear, you look stunning. Thank you for everything you do for him." The entire evening was a masterclass in Henderson family mythology. We sat at the dinner table, the same one I had sat at for countless holidays and celebrations, and I listened to the performance. Arthur dominated the conversation, telling stories that burnished the legend of his son, Lucas the high school football star, Lucas the brilliant business school student, Lucas the unstoppable force in the corporate world. Lucas accepted the praise with a practiced humility that I now recognized as arrogance. He would catch my eye across the table and smile, a secret shared smile that was meant to say, "Look at us, we've made it." I smiled back, and my smile was a promise of the reckoning to come. I endured the toasts. Arthur's was a long, rambling speech about legacy and ambition. Eleanor's was a tearful tribute to her perfect son. Emily, who had always been quieter and more observant than the rest of her family, gave a simple, "Congratulations, Lucas. You worked hard for this." My internal monologue was a steady, calm narration of the facts. He is lying. They are enabling him. This is all a charade. This is the last time I will ever sit at this table. When it was my turn, a hush fell over the room. They all looked at me, expecting a loving, adoring tribute. I stood up, my movements fluid and deliberate. "To Lucas," I began, my voice clear and strong. "No one knows how hard he's worked this past year better than I do." I saw Lucas preen, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He has been juggling so many things, putting in so many long hours, making so many sacrifices, and I wanted to commemorate that dedication. I paused, letting the anticipation build. "I've put together a little tribute to all the hard work Lucas has put in. In fact, I made a copy for everyone." I gestured to the portfolios. "Please, open them." The scene replayed, but now with the full weight of my knowledge behind it. I watched Emily's face crumble as she saw the first page, a bank statement with the $3,000 payment to Sophia Jensen highlighted in yellow. I watched Arthur's jovial mask crack and fall away as he flipped to a picture of Lucas and Sophia kissing on a hotel balcony, the date clearly visible in the corner. I watched Eleanor's hand fly to her mouth as she saw the receipts for expensive jewelry I had never received. The room descended into chaos. Eleanor's shriek was a raw, wounded sound. Arthur's face was a thundercloud of fury. "What is this?" he finally roared, not at Lucas, but at me. Lucas, for his part, was speechless. He stared at the evidence, his face draining of all color. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and disbelief. He was finally seeing me, not as an accessory to his life, but as the architect of its ruin. "It's a record," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the noise. "A record of the past year. All the late nights, all the business trips, all the hard work." I looked directly at Lucas. "Her name is Sophia Jensen. He pays her rent. The apartment is at 1450 Elm Park Drive. I'm sure you'll be very happy there." I reached into my purse, took out the key to our apartment, and placed it gently on the table next to my untouched plate. "I believe this belongs to you now." I looked around at the stunned, horrified faces of his family. "Thank you for dinner, Eleanor Arthur. It's been an enlightening evening." I turned and walked out of the dining room, my back straight, my steps even. I did not run. I did not cry. I simply exited the structure I had just demolished, leaving them all in the rubble. The fallout was immediate and predictable. My phone began to ring before I had even reached my car. I didn't answer. Voicemails and texts flooded in. They were all from Lucas. The first few were filled with rage. "How could you do this to me? To my family? You're insane, Chloe." Then came the desperate pleading. "Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. It was a mistake. I love you." Then, the threats. "You've ruined my life, and you'll regret it." I listened to the first few, then deleted the rest without listening. I drove to my friend Maria's house, my hands steady on the wheel. The next day, a call came from an unknown number. I answered it. It was Arthur. His voice was cold, devoid of the booming bonhomie he usually affected. "You've made a very powerful enemy, young lady," he said, his tone low and menacing. "I hope, for the sake of your career, that you understand the gravity of what you've done." It was a veiled threat, a promise to use his influence to harm my professional life. "Thank you for your concern, Arthur," I said, my voice as cold as his. "But I document my work very carefully. I suggest you advise your son to do the same." I hung up. I blocked Lucas's number. I blocked Eleanor's. I blocked Arthur's. The only communication that broke through was a single text message from Emily. It simply said, "I'm sorry, Chloe, he didn't deserve you." I read it, felt a flicker of something akin to sympathy for her, and then blocked her number too. I needed a clean break. I relied on my friends, my true support system. Maria let me stay with her, fielding my calls, acting as a gatekeeper against the storm. I did not hide. I did not grieve, not in the same way as before. The sadness was gone, replaced by a sense of quiet finality. I had closed a chapter. I had razed a condemned building. It was time to clear the site and prepare for a new foundation. Several months passed. The Henderson family storm had moved on, leaving a quiet calm in its wake. My career, far from being ruined by Arthur's empty threats, was flourishing. I had poured all my energy, all my focus, into my work, and it had paid off. I was leading a major new project, a downtown skyscraper that would reshape the city's skyline. One afternoon, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line was simply an apology. It was from Sophia Jensen. She wrote that she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted to offer an explanation. She asked if I would be willing to meet. Curiosity and a desire for the final piece of the puzzle led me to agree. We met at a neutral coffee shop. She was younger than I expected, and she looked nervous. She told me her story. Lucas had pursued her relentlessly at work. He had told her that his relationship with me was over in all but name, that we were living together as roommates for financial convenience, until he could move out without causing a scene. He had painted me as emotionally unstable, clinging to a dead relationship. He had promised her a future, the same future he had been promising me. She had believed him. She had only learned the truth when a furious Lucas had shown up at her apartment the night of the dinner, blaming her for everything. He was a convincing liar, she said, her voice quiet. He made me believe I was rescuing him. I listened, and I felt not anger towards her, but a strange sense of solidarity. We were two women who had been deceived by the same man, two different blueprints for the same fraudulent project. He wasn't just my partner, I told her. He was my project. And the design was fundamentally flawed. We talked for an hour. When we parted, I felt a final sense of closure. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about understanding the full scope of his deceit. He was not a man who had made a mistake. He was a man whose entire character was a lie. The story concluded not with bitterness, but with a profound sense of liberation. The next day, I stood on the top floor of my new building, a skeleton of steel, reaching for the sky. I looked out over the city at the endless possibilities. I had the blueprints for the project spread out on a makeshift table, the clean, precise lines mapping out a bold new structure. I thought about the life I had demolished, the rubble I had left behind. It was not a tragedy. It was a necessary clearing of the ground. The demolition of my old life had become the foundation for a much stronger, more authentic one, a structure I was now designing on my own terms.